Continuing to read Dallas Pimiento, Book 1, Bronco. This piece is called Ghost Dick is Swinging. The following day, cliches notwithstanding, verification of the mirage was rendered inert by the passing. Some, mostly those affiliated with the moisture police, said feeding of flawless maple boards, an expensive movie camera, and, I must admit myself, feet first through the machinery of the sub-sino miniature. The reason I never mentioned this before should be obvious to anyone who has studied one of my early paintings. For those for whom art is a painful distraction from sports, the reason is that sometimes what seems like a good idea, while profoundly and dare I say spiritually stoned, seems penumbrously confused the next day. Alterations need to be made, all the while keeping in mind the spirit of what still has the merit of being the product of one's own mind. For alterations of this kind, I go to a small room. Soon the cookies will be finished. Why don't you make use of your anger, Dallas? I used to want to. I got permission from John Lydon in the song Rise, where he says anger is an energy. But I'm too old and cautious now. Two black girls in collusion deprive me of my seat. A minor thing, but my usual seat means that I can't see the TV even if I were to try. Luckily, I brought cookies. I bought that small room. It's empty now. Fire made it good. Somehow Dr. Tennis had survived the cataclysm. While others discussed their protein shakes and weight gain formulas, Tennis remained true to his nature, huddled in isolation behind a vending machine, and survived. He glanced at his watch. A grotesquely distorted caricature of Paul Rubens had descended as far as his nose into the sleeping alcove. The left side of the watch was the intensive, the right the extensive. Was ever any man so put upon when consideration was made of the disparity between what his goals were and what his duties? He kicked at a watermelon rind he came across after he had climbed out of the trash-filled pit. Dr. Tennis had specialized in the archaeology of the outside world as filtered into his own. No more. He figured rightly, for he was a scientist, that he was now in the outside world. "Excuse me," he said, approaching two black girls engaged in conversation, "but I'm lost. How do I get downtown?" They looked at him as if he was the ceiling. Finally one pointed in a direction. Her "that way" was involuntary, a vestigial appendage that had no actual function. Dr. Tennis thanked them both and headed in the direction indicated. Behind him he heard an outburst of laughter, but he did not look back. The core of the apple had turned to gelatin. Fortunately for Aimwell, he got to the bus stop later than usual. It began to rain, but he didn't get drenched. The bus arrived less than a minute after the first drop struck his suit of space-age cardboard and rag fiber. "It's growing back, ain't it?" The woman across the aisle from Aimwell grinned broadly and giggled. "Yeah," she added. Aimwell smiled in return and busied himself withdrawing a magazine from his satchel. The woman had referred to his hair, which Aimwell had himself trimmed extremely short for a reason that he now thought silly. Anger. He longed to fish out his floppy hat from the satchel, but didn't want the woman to make any further comments to him. Of course, he didn't want to be rude either. That might lead to more of the same interaction he hated with strangers. The magazine, Backache, had a circulation of about 50. It had been started the year before by an acquaintance of Aimwell's from his college days. That was long ago, wasn't it? Thought Aimwell as he examined the cartoon in the magazine. The signature in the lower right hand read Bootheragis. Aimwell got off the bus in Rameke Street. The A in that name should have two dots over it, but I couldn't figure out how to get my helper machine to make the two dots. These dots are called umlauts. The large man who sat behind the reception desk in the place of business Aimwell entered had two pink scars on top of his bald head, as if he had had horns surgically removed. It did not cross Aimwell's mind that these scars were like umlauts, possibly shifting one's apprehension of the man, whose name was Claude, rather like the umlauts that are supposed to be in the name Rameke shift the A to a hard sound like that in the word eight. "Hi, Claude," Aimwell forced himself to say as he passed the receptionist's desk. Whatever Claude said in reply is irrelevant, as Aimwell certainly didn't dwell on it, having moved on, even as he greeted the man with only the slightest eye contact. Aimwell went directly to the half flight of stairs that led to the raised platform where his desk was. Everyone knew by now that Aimwell did not make routine salutations to anyone outside his handful of borderline intimates among the employees. He would respond if greeted first, but rarely initiate an exchange. There were 6 desks on the raised platform. Although not originally intended so, the desks on the platform have become prestigious and were now occupied by the senior staffers of Pincher Panther Pilfer Proofer, the company Aimwell worked for. No one knew what the platform's original purpose had been. Some said the building had once been a cotton market, the platform the place from where the bidding had been directed. Lobar, the possessor of another of the supposedly coveted desks, approached Aimwell as the latter slung his satchel onto his disordered desk. "You seen this?" Lobar thrust a sheet of paper under Aimwell's nose. "How can I have? I just got here." Aimwell reached out for the paper, but Lobar snatched it away. No, you read your own," he said. "My own?" Lobar pointed at a barely sealed envelope on the top of a pile of books that sat on the edge of Aimwell's desk. "Thanks," Aimwell said sarcastically. He sat down in the ancient chair that bore his name on the back and tore open the envelope. Hagram, the managing director of Pincher Panther Pilfer Proofer, was sitting in his office when Aimwell burst in. "Do you know how many people received one of those letters, Aimwell?" Hagram growled as the first angry words emerged from Aimwell's mouth. "I don't know as I care." Aimwell stood across the desk, one much larger than his own, looking down at Hagram. "Everybody in the building, from Claude all the way up to me." I won't submit to brain analysis," Aimwell shouted. "For information, every one of these letters is worded slightly different from each other." "Is this Thorwaldsen's idea?" "Probably." Hagram toyed with a thick black marker. He uncapped it. "His or his son's?" He sniffed appreciatively at the marker fumes. "How did these letters differ from each other?" Aimwell asked, as if he suddenly realized what Hagram had said earlier. Hagram pulled his own copy of the letter from inside a copy of the Beginner's Guide to Moss Gardening. He unfolded it and held it up to Aimwell's curiously amber-colored eyes. "They each bear a different name at the top. See, mine says H.D. Hagram." "How very philosophical." More sarcasm from Aimwell. "Nobody quits Pincher Panther Pilfer Proofer." Hagram tucked the letter back into the book. "I smell hot dogs cooking." Aimwell's eyelids closed halfway. Would Aimwell submit to brain analysis despite his protest to the contrary? Hagram assumed he would. After the former had left his office, Hagram reconsidered his storage of his letter in the Moss Gardening Guide. The book was intended for his wife, a gift. She had been talking lately about wanting to start a moss garden. The first thing Hagram did that day upon arriving at work was to rifle through the company's extensive reference library until he found something appropriate. Then he ripped out anything identifying the book as company property. Now he shoved the letter in the bottom left-hand drawer of his desk, where he kept his carbon paper and generic brand adhesive bandages. No sense in letting his wife see the letter. If he was lucky, she would never have to know that he had undergone brain analysis. If he was luckier still, he would somehow wriggle out of having the procedure done altogether. On his lunch hour, Aimwell gobbled down the dried papaya strips and small sandwich he had brought with him before he had even left his desk. Instead of his usual trek upstairs to the disused solarium where he either read or napped, Aimwell went outside. He walked a few blocks down to the offices of Kindergarten Anecdote, a gelatinous pinecone agency. "May I help you?" asked the nurse-like woman in horn-rimmed spectacles behind the front desk. "Yes," affirmed Aimwell. "Is Ted Gomez in?" "Yes, he is. May I tell him who is asking for him?" "Tell him it's Rectus Aimwell. He knows me." The woman picked up a white phone, the old-fashioned rotary kind. Cell phones and computerized singularity of stupidity have not yet been invented in the time this story takes place and probably never will. And spoke with someone. After a brief exchange, she recradled the phone and looked at Aimwell. "Go on back, through this door." She indicated a door behind her on her right. There was another behind her on her left as well, and all the way to the end of the hall. "Thank you," Aimwell responded. He followed her instructions and found himself before yet another woman at the desk. This one was more librarian than nurse. She pointed Aimwell to a short sofa of chrome and orange vinyl and told him to wait. It would only be a few minutes, she said. And then she returned to the work she had been doing when he appeared before her, typing on an electric typewriter. Aimwell wished he had brought the magazine he had been reading earlier with him. The choices laid out on the table beside him were unappealing. Macaroni and cheese journal, devil may fare, progressive ironmonger. Amwell would feel embarrassed reading any of them. He looked around at the walls. There was a framed lithograph of a 19th century hunting scene hanging behind the secretary. It was not to Amwell's taste. Funny that Gomez would have chosen such a thing. Amwell's understanding was that Gomez was an aficionado of abstract expressionism. Maybe he didn't really know the man at all. The door to the left of the lithograph opened and a portly man emerged. Gomez followed this man. They were continuing their conversation from within. "I'll give you a call tomorrow morning and tell you how things stand." Gomez had his hand on the portly man's shoulder as he said this. Amwell hoped he wouldn't touch him when his turn came. "Thank you, Ted," the portly man said in a deep voice as he turned about to shake hands. His voice had a wet, gurgling quality, as if his cheek pouches were filled with cornbread and gravy. Hold on. As Portly exited, Gomez nodded at Amwell. "Come on in, pal," he said. He stood in the doorway holding the door open while Amwell squeezed past. In the office, Amwell saw the examples of abstract expressionism he had expected. "So you keep them in here," he said, pointing at the largest of the paintings, a field of orange in which the vaguest of figures in white and black floated. "Yeah," Gomez agreed. "I let Gloria to the lobby how she wants." He moved behind his desk, waving at a chair on the other side. "Have a seat," he said. "This is my idea of an office," Amwell enthused as he sat. "Our aesthetics are in alignment," Gomez mused. "Yeah," Amwell grew somber. "So what's on your mind, pal?" Gomez wore no jacket. His white button-down had its sleeves rolled up. He was still shockingly good-looking despite his 50 years. "You told me once that you might have a job for me," Amwell began. That was over 2 years ago. "The reason I bring it up is that I may have to quit Pincher Panther Pilfer Proofer." "Why? What's going on?" "They want everyone there to submit to brain analysis." "Really?" Gomez fingered his tan chin with his tan hand. "I can't and won't undergo such a procedure," Amwell was emphatic. "No, I can see that. And it isn't just because my brain is different and they'll spot it. I wouldn't submit to brain analysis even if I had been born here. I understand. So naturally, I've come to you. Even if you don't have a job for me, maybe you can give me some good advice. You're the only person who knows that I'm really Grover Tennis." Amwell made a slightly freer exhalation on the name, as if it gave him immense relief and satisfaction to say it. Ted Gomez thought for a moment. "Grover, I wasn't stretching the truth when I expressed doubt about my finding you a position here. Things really aren't going that well around here." "But," Gomez glanced at the door, "that man you saw leave just now may have something." "I don't know what all this is," Dallas Pimiento insisted. "We think you do," Agent Loren countered. "I didn't write this tripe." Pimiento spoke of the thick manuscript that lay on the table before him. "It has your name on the cover," Agent Green, the third man in the small interrogation room, pointed out. "That doesn't mean anything." Pimiento thumped the manuscript with his thumb and forefinger. "And even if it did, so what? If I did write this so-called novel, what of it?" "Mr. Pimiento, there are things in this manuscript, depictions of people, descriptions of events, things that if you wrote this book you must have first-hand knowledge of, and yet, from our research, you shouldn't have any knowledge of," Agent Loren explained. "Does he always talk this way?" Pimiento asked Agent Green. "I guess you'd be an expert on proper syntax," Green replied. "I know how to speak and how to write, but that doesn't make me a writer." "Then what are you?" "I'm a painter. Ich bin ein Maler." "And however you say that in French as well." "Mr. Pimiento, we've seen some examples of your so-called work." Agent Loren put his foot up on the empty folding chair beside him. "It's garbage. We know for a fact that you've never sold a single painting," Agent Green added. "That's not true. I haven't very many, but how many?" Loren demanded. "Oh, I'll say," Pimiento thought, 4 or 5 notes. "It's more than that. It's that close to 10. 10? Agent Loren repeated. "You sold 10 of those slapdash canvases." "Mr. Pimiento, it's clear to us that your painting is nothing but a cover for your real work." Green leaned forward across the table. "Writing?" Pimiento asked. "That's right." Pimiento looked from Green to Loren and back. "Who exactly do you guys work for again?" he asked. All right, let's do this again next time.